Copper Sun by Sharon Draper. Chapter 6, From Sand to Ship. Amari awoke stiff, sore, and very cold the next morning. Small, beach-living insects had feasted on her skin overnight, and she scratched at the red bites that covered her legs and arms. She looked around in alarm because the dark wall of Cape Coast Castle, which had surrounded her every night since coming to this place, had disappeared. Then she remembered the small door, the bright sand, the blue water, and the fiery burn on her shoulder. Afi, already awake, looked at her without smiling. "Today is the day, Amari." Amari did not need to ask her for what. They were all fed generously once again, and more salve was applied to their wounds. The men were then kicked and yelled at, shackled back together, and marched out of the pen. Faisal was the last in line. He turned and glanced at Amari with a look that said, "I would have been a good husband, Amari. I would have loved you more with every sunrise and sunset." Then he was gone. Amari pulled her shackled hands up to her face. The reins rattled in rhythm to her sobs. "You knew him?" Afi asked her. "Yes, he is from my village. We were captured on the same day." "He is special to you, am I right?" "Oh, yes," Amari told her, a small smile breaking through her tears. We were to be married." Her smile faded then. "You must forget him," Afi told her harshly. "But," Amari protested, "he is dead to you now, just as your parents and your brother and my family are dead, gone to be with the ancestors." "But why, Afi? Why must I let go of the only link to who I truly am?" "What you are is a slave," Afi told her, her voice cold and firm. "You have been bought by men who will sell your body and do with it what they want. You will be beaten and raped and killed, and your young man can do nothing about it." "You are cruel," Amari cried, shaking with anger. "I am honest," she replied sadly. "So why should I endure this? Why did you not just let me die in there?" Amari cried out. "Because I see a power in you," Afi lifted her shackled wrist and reached over to touch Amari. "You know, certain people are chosen to survive. I don't know why, but you are one of those who must remember the past and tell those yet unborn. You must live." "But why?" "Because your mother would want you to. Because the sun continues to shine. I don't know, but you must." She said nothing else, just sat down and began tracing pictures in the sand with her finger. Amari had little time to mourn Base's removal, or her past or future, however. The soldiers came for the women next. They were herded together, then lined up and shackled 2 by 2. Afi was chained to Amari, to her great relief. She tried to stay calm, but it was impossible. It was terrifying not to be able to understand what was happening and not to know what was to come. She saw she wasn't the only one. Some of the other women screamed and tried to grab handfuls of sand as they were forced out of the holding pen. Led across the sand, Amari found it surprisingly hard to walk. Her feet sank with every step, and as they got closer to the edge of the beach, Amari noticed that the water never stopped moving, sending huge waves of itself against the sand. First blue, then white, then blue again. Bubbling, churning, even leaping onto the land, it seemed to Amari that the ocean was reaching out to grab and devour her. Many of the women backed away from the surf and were promptly lashed. Amari was frightened, but she knew the water would not kill her. Not today. She watched as the last of the men were loaded into small rowboats, which rocked wildly in the waves. Some of the men cried out in terror. The boats became smaller as they got closer to the death house in the distance. Then Amari could see them no more. A set of empty rowboats, much larger than Amari at first thought, awaited the next group of captives. The women were pushed from the soft warmth of the sand to the water-soaked beach, and Amari very quickly found herself standing in water up to her knees. She screamed in spite of herself at the sudden coldness of the water and its constant movement against her legs. It crashed against her as if it were angry and seemed to be trying to pull Amari away from the land. Her feet could not find a safe place. The sand beneath the water kept shifting. The water splashed onto her face, and she discovered with surprise that it was salty, like tears. Afi, sloshing in the shallows just ahead of Amari, was knocked sideways by a wave and fell, taking Amari with her. They both struggled to raise their heads above the water, but the weight of their leg and neck irons pulled them down. Water seeped into Amari's mouth and nose. She could not even scream. Their captors cursed and hauled Afi and Amari up, then shoved them into the small rowboat. Afi breathed hard and tried not to show how frightened she was. Amari felt no need to hide her fear. She gripped the side of the boat fiercely and shrieked with every swallow of water, with every spray of water in her face. As the captives were loaded into the boat, it rocked and tilted, as if it were about to toss them into the water once more. And then the boat left the shore. 40 terrified women and girls howled as the boat began to float upon the sea. The soldiers were on shore laughed at their fright, and the sailors on board beat them with their whips. Amari's arm and face were lashed and sliced as she huddled with Afi in the bottom of the boat, trying to get away from the sailors' ferocity. Why do they beat us? Amari thought wildly. To silence us? To stop our fears? Nothing made sense. Screaming gradually subsided into deep burning groans, which no salve could soften. Amari lifted her head and looked around. The land was quickly disappearing, the soldiers looking like miniatures of themselves as they dragged another coffle of slaves into another small boat. She could hear the cries of the seabirds above and the rhythmic splash of the oars as the rowers carried them away from her land and closer to the huge ship waiting for them. She looked back with longing at the land of her birth. Amari knew she would never see this place again.